Netflix recently released the latest chapter of their Untold series, a four-part documentary surrounding the infamous University of Florida football team from 2005 to 2010, led by head coach Urban Meyer. This is a documentary college football fans have been anticipating for years. This was one of the most complicated, controversial, and captivating college football teams of all time, and they just so happened to win 2 national championships in 3 years. Unfortunately, the general feeling is that viewers were left wanting much more at the end of the 4 episodes. Netflix did a very poor job with covering the major controversies within the team and why this team is so interesting. Instead, what we got was revisionist history. We were made to feel bad for Urban Meyer and the team, and they left out just about every major event that made this team so popular. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Cole from Philadelphia Media, and today I'm going to try my best to cover what Netflix didn't about the University of Florida Gators football during Urban Meyer's reign. They were certainly a legendary program during the time in terms of their accomplishments, but there was so much more to them that the Untold series just didn't even begin to dive into. If at any point you enjoy what you're watching, do me a favor and leave a like on the video. Feel free to leave a comment about your thoughts on the video as well as your thoughts on the Netflix series if you watched it. Subscribe to the channel to see more videos like this, and let me know I'm doing something right. Now, onto the video. A New York Times article from 2013 states that among the 121 players from the 2008 University of Florida Gators football roster, 41 of them have been arrested, either in college or sometime afterwards, and sometimes both. That stat is from 10 years ago, meaning there's a good chance that the number has increased. Despite the 40-plus arrests, the man who led them at quarterback was none other than Tim Tebow, a homeschooled Christian kid who won a Heisman Trophy. Brandon Spikes, Percy Harvin, Cam Newton, Aaron Hernandez, Riley Cooper, Marquise Pouncey, and Mike Pouncey are just some of the names from the Gators roster during this time. And of course, at head coach, Urban Meyer. From the start, the Netflix documentary focuses on Urban's approach to coaching. Yeah, it also gets into his take-no-prisoners mentality and how he only expects perfection from his players. If you're not willing to do what it takes to be perfect, leave. But Urban himself certainly wasn't perfect. Meyer reportedly developed a quote-unquote circle of trust during his time as head coach. Of course, Meyer denies it ever happened, but former players have confirmed it. If you were in the circle of trust, that meant you were treated like gold. And I'm not just saying you got the best locker or the water boy always gave you a towel first. I'm talking about covering up your failed drug tests, downplaying physical altercations with coaches, sitting out of practice, dictating what the team does, etc. A prominent player in the circle of trust was Janoris Jenkins. Jenkins played for the Gators from 2008 until prior to the 2011 season, where he was unexpectedly kicked off the team after being charged with possession of marijuana. But it wasn't Urban who kicked him off. Urban was gone by then, and Will Muschamp was the new head coach after Urban's health issues caused him to step down, which we'll get into later. Shortly after the expulsion from the team, Jenkins told the Orlando Sentinel, "If Meyer was still the coach at Florida, I'd still be there." We know that he's likely right because after the 2008 season opener, Jenkins walked out of the locker room during Meyer's post-game speech and threatened to quit the team, but Urban allowed him back. He was also arrested in 2009 for fighting and resisting arrest and for marijuana possession in January of 2011, which is not the same as the one that resulted in him being kicked off the team. That one occurred in April of 2011. Urban never kicked him off the team, and Janoris Jenkins was never even mentioned in the series. Other members of Meyer's circle of trust were Percy Harvin, Brandon Spikes, and Aaron Hernandez, who all sat out that 2008 season opener. Multiple sources have confirmed they sat that game out due to failed drug tests for marijuana and were suspended by the university, but Meyer covered for them, and a former player said that they'd been practicing with the first team all week, and then all of a sudden, they showed up to the sidelines in walking boots. So let's get to another member of that circle, Percy Harvin. In addition to the reportedly covered-up failed marijuana test, Harvin once refused to participate in conditioning drills, and on another highly popularized occasion, he fought a coach. Proving the unfair special treatment players like Harvin received, the team was running up the bleachers one day when Harvin stopped and sat down. When asked to continue, he replied, "This expletive stops now." A former player said the next day their form of conditioning was now playing basketball. The fight between him and wide receivers coach Billy Gonzalez is an interesting one because both claim it never happened. It also wasn't much of a fight at all, it was pretty one-sided. Now, in a Netflix documentary titled Untold, you would think they would have cleared up things like this. You would think they would have gotten inside info on the Janoris Jenkins situations, Percy Harvin fight, special treatment at practices, but no, you got none of that. A story like this doesn't spring up out of nowhere. Something had to have happened, and we were hoping to hear former players either confirm or deny it, but we didn't get any of that. There were also rumors that Gonzalez resigned by leaving a post-it note on Meyer's desk. We didn't get any confirmation on that, but Gonzalez has since claimed that it never happened. Billy Gonzalez, the fight, the conditioning incident, none of these things were mentioned during the series. From what I've been able to gather, Brandon Spikes, a prominent figure in the documentary and another member of Meyer's group of favorites, didn't get into any major trouble during his time in Gainesville. He was once suspended a half a game for an eye-gouging attempt, and per the source I mentioned earlier, he had a failed drug test covered up, but that's pretty minor stuff compared to what some of his teammates did. Not that I'm attempting to compare bad behaviors. Spikes, though, did have his troubles once he got to the NFL, receiving a suspension for a violation of the NFL's banned substance rules, and he was later cut by the Patriots for being involved in a hit-and-run. None of these were mentioned in the series, but his eye gouge and drug test failure pale in comparison to what tight end Aaron Hernandez did. I don't need to give you the story on Aaron Hernandez, you can find that elsewhere. He was charged with first-degree murder in 2013, and in April 2015, he was found guilty of the murder, sentenced to life in prison. The only mention of Hernandez in the series was the 2007 Gainesville bar fight, which was hardly covered and Tim Tebow took the blame for. This wasn't mentioned in the documentary, but Hernandez was 17 years old, consumed 2 alcoholic drinks, refused to pay the bill, and had to be escorted out by an employee. Hernandez then sucker punched the employee in the side of the head, rupturing his eardrum. The documentary did make reference to the fact that despite the plenty of run-ins with the law, including this one, they all just went away. The victim told the police that the team and their lawyers contacted him and a settlement was being worked out, but the team denied this, probably because they didn't want it to seem as though they were covering it up. The police department recommended felony battery charges for Hernandez, but the incident was settled out of court and, like most things in the swamp during this time, nothing became of it. The bar incident occurred in April of 2007, and then in September of that same year, Hernandez was picked out of a police lineup for a double shooting that occurred in Gainesville. A witness described the shooter as a Hispanic male, about 230 pounds and covered in tattoos, before selecting the photo of Hernandez. Hernandez and the Pouncey twins were called in to speak to the police, but they first met with the team attorney, who likely briefed them on how to conduct themselves. The Pounceys cooperated while Hernandez fell asleep in the interrogation room before invoking his right to an attorney and refusing to answer questions. The double shooting involved a man being shot in the arm and another man being shot in the back of the head, who somehow managed to survive but had to learn how to walk and talk again. 2 days after Hernandez was brought into the police station, he was no longer a suspect in the case, and the witness who had selected him in the lineup changed his statement, saying it wasn't Hernandez who fired the gun. Like most things in the swamp during this time, nothing came of it, and none of this was mentioned in the series. Aaron Hernandez was obviously a huge part of the team and did plenty more than those few things. But this isn't the Aaron Hernandez story. This is the story of the Florida Gators. I'm not going to cover Hernandez more than this. We all know what eventually happened with him. I don't have inside sources. I just do my research from publicly available information. That's the difference between this video and the Untold documentary. They have plenty of his teammates and coaches in the show. The fact that they only mention Hernandez once, just brushing over his bar fight as a minor incident, and don't cover any of the other things he did, is just absolutely ridiculous and probably the worst part about this whole thing. Another player who wasn't mentioned at all was Riley Cooper, who was a wide receiver on both of the national championship winning teams, and most NFL fans probably remember him for an incident in the summer of 2013, where he was caught on video calling a security guard a racial slur at a concert. Yet another player mentioned just once was Cam Newton, a future Heisman winner, first overall pick, and NFL MVP. Newton backed up Tebow in 2007 and 2008 before transferring to Blinn College, a junior college in Texas, for his junior year, where he led his team to an NJCAA national championship and then landed at Auburn University, an SEC foe of the Gators, and won a national championship there. In a recent TikTok Cam made reacting to the documentary, he said he would have liked to have heard from players like Joe Hayden and the Pouncey twins. He also criticized the documentary's downplaying of quarterback Chris Leak's ability. Leak was the QB before Tebow got there, and even started over Tebow initially, and he is right. The series definitely made him out to be a subpar player. Lastly, Newton stated he never received a national championship ring from Florida, despite being on the 2008 national champion roster. Now, why may he not have received a ring? Well, surely that was covered in the documentary, being that it was a huge sports topic in the world at the time, but no. It wasn't mentioned or even alluded to. What I'm talking about is Cam Newton's laptop incident. Again, not a single reference was made to this incident, and Cam himself was mentioned just once as a member of the 2007 recruiting class in the series. The laptop incident occurred during the fall of 2008 when a UF student reported that his laptop had been stolen from his dorm. The university began looking into the situation and discovered user C. Newton had accessed the university website from this student's laptop. Police paid Cam a visit, and they spotted the laptop sitting on his desk. The student who owned the laptop had painted a picture on it, but now Cam's laptop was painted black and had Cam Newton on it in white lettering. Nearly certain this was the laptop in question, police went to see if the serial numbers matched, but somehow they didn't. Police then left the room to double-check the serial numbers they'd written down, and when they returned, the laptop was gone. That's because Cam had launched it out the window. He was arrested and his phone was confiscated. While the phone was in the possession of the police, he received a message from an individual telling him that the laptop was now behind a dumpster beneath his window, proving that he tossed it out the window. Charged with burglary, larceny, and obstruction of justice, Newton was suspended from the university for a year. The charges eventually were reduced, and for some reason, the student whose laptop was stolen refused to cooperate in the trial, leading to police dropping charges. So, like most things in the swamp, from 2005 to 2010, nothing came of it. I don't want to spend too much time on Cam because him and his actions are just one small piece of this team and their controversy, but tell me how none of this was covered in the Netflix series. None of it. Which, depending on when you're watching this, my video on Cam Newton's bizarre college career is either out now on my channel or coming very soon, so be sure to check that out and turn on notifications in case it hasn't been released yet. 3 days prior to the 2008 National Championship game between Florida and Oklahoma, Cam Newton announced he would be transferring out of Florida. The laptop incident may have been enough for the university and football program to be upset with him already, but then after getting him out of felony charges, I'm going to guess they weren't exactly ecstatic with the fact that he left the school. But what do I know? I'm just speculating, considering we received a 4-part documentary that didn't include any of this. The 2009 SEC Championship was covered in the series, where undefeated Florida faced undefeated Alabama, with the Gators seeking their third national championship in 4 years, and winning the SEC would be another step along the way. Instead, they lost to the Crimson Tide, 32-13, in a game that saw Florida put up one of their worst defensive performances in years, as Bama gained nearly 500 yards of offense during the game. What was not mentioned in the series was that one of their best defensive players, Carlos Dunlap, missed the game, as 4 days prior, he was arrested for a DUI and was subsequently suspended by the team. The 2009 SEC Championship game was a huge moment in college football. Florida had been so dominant over the past few seasons, and the question each year was were they going to go undefeated this year and go all the way. It was a foregone conclusion that they were the best team in college football. They were a dynasty and a powerhouse in the college football universe. After their loss to Alabama, Bama went on to win the national title that year, and since then they've won 5 more times. Other SEC schools such as Auburn, LSU, and Georgia have won as well, while Florida hasn't won since. The entire landscape of college football as we know it could have potentially been completely different had Carlos Dunlap played in that game. But as far as the documentary is concerned, they must have not thought Dunlap's absence or DUI mattered. Urban Meyer and the University of Florida also must have not cared much about the DUI, as Dunlap played in the Sugar Bowl, their next game about a month later. Something that was covered to some degree in the series was Urban Meyer taking a leave of absence from the program. During the early morning hours following the SEC Championship loss, Meyer was admitted to the hospital. It was said that he went there for dehydration, but his wife's 911 call was later released, where she said that he woke up in the middle of the night with chest pains, felt his side tingling, and fell to the floor. Prior to the Sugar Bowl, Meyer announced he'd be taking a leave of absence after the game. But when the game concluded, Meyer then announced he was planning on returning to coach next season. The 2010 Florida Gators football season included Urban Meyer getting into a fight with reporter Jeremy Fowler and running back Chris Rainey's suspension thanks to his arrest for alleged aggravated stalking. Not to mention, many of the stars from the Florida national title teams had left for the NFL. Tim Tebow, Brandon Spikes, Brandon James, causing the depleted team to have an 8-5 record. The fight with Jeremy Fowler stemmed from Florida receiver Deontay Thompson referring to new quarterback John Brantley as a real quarterback, compared to Tebow. Being that Tebow was a part of 2 national championships and was a Heisman winner, it's kind of an odd thing to say, so Fowler did his job and asked Urban about it. Urban lashed out on him and told him if that was my son, we'd be going at it right now, referencing a physical altercation. Neither of the incidents were mentioned in the series. After the 2010 season, Meyer resigned as the head coach at Florida, citing wanting to spend more time with his family, specifying that it wasn't because of health issues. He became an analyst for ESPN, and then when rumors of him potentially becoming Ohio State's head coach began to swirl, he quickly shut them down. Less than 2 weeks later, Urban Meyer accepted a job to become Ohio State's head coach. Meyer is often criticized for his departure from Florida and quick acceptance of the Ohio State job, though it is important to note that when leaving Gainesville, Meyer made it abundantly clear that it was not for health reasons, that it was because he wanted to spend more time with his family. The year prior, yes, he did take a short leave of absence for health reasons, but he later said that it was a knee-jerk reaction. Health issues will come up again later, and that's when I can see it being more warranted. But once he took the Ohio State job, people made a mockery of his health issues, which you've got to feel for him there, considering he really didn't get a fair shake in that regard. At Ohio State, Urban won the national championship in 2014, his third national championship, but his time there was also nothing short of controversial. Zach Smith, a coach on his staff at Florida and his wide receivers coach at OSU, back in 2009, was arrested on suspicion of aggravated battery of his pregnant wife. She claimed he grabbed her by the neck and pushed her against the wall. In a 2018 interview, his wife stated that she was pressured to drop the charges, so she did, and like most things in the swamp, from 2005 to 2010, it just went away. Meyer bringing Smith along with him to Ohio State proved to be a crucial blow to Urban's coaching career. In 2015, Smith and his wife separated and later divorced, with his wife claiming that he had abused her on multiple occasions, and Smith was accused of stalking, harassment, and trespassing during the years 2015 to 2018. A story was published online revealing the incidents. Meyer fired Smith later that day without giving a reason, and then a Big Ten media day, Meyer claimed he knew nothing about the 2015 incident. The matter was investigated, and it was discovered Meyer had received messages from the school's associate athletic director suggesting he delete texts between him and Smith. Meyer later revealed that he knew about the 2015 incident and reported it to the appropriate channels. By the end of the investigation, Meyer had received a suspension and his reputation tarnished. 2018 was his last season as the Buckeyes head coach, as he retired at the end of the season, once again citing health issues as he had a cyst on his brain. I'm by no means going to judge someone on their health issues, and I personally think Urban dealt with some hardships. But if there was a time to call him out for using his health problems as a scapegoat, it would be leaving Ohio State after the Zach Smith incident and blaming that on his health. Again, I'm not someone who's going to call out people on their health, but I can see why fans would have at this point. It's kind of why he gets a bad rap regarding that. And in case you were wondering, Zach Smith was never mentioned in the series. In essence, the Florida Gators football program, while Urban Meyer was at the helm, was full of controversy, crime, and cover-ups. They were incredibly talented young players who achieved plenty of success, but were by no means role models. They made mistakes, to say the least, but rarely had to pay the price for them, enabling them to become repeat offenders. There are more stories from this team than I could fit into this video, and I'm sure I'm already running longer than I'd like to, and I'm also sure I forgot some things. It's almost like someone should make a 4-part series about these teams, where they interview the players and coaches. Oh wait, they did do that. They just chose to talk about 99% positive things from a team that dealt with plenty of negatives. One thing is for certain, the Netflix Untold series was absolute malpractice and a disgrace. In my heart of hearts, I truly do believe that many of these topics were discussed by the interviewees and that untold stories were revealed, but they ended up on the cutting room floor. You could tell they were alluding to it at times, but then they never go in depth on any of it. How do you make this documentary without talking about Aaron Hernandez, without talking about Cam Newton? I just don't understand how they could have possibly gotten to the end of this project and decided that what they eventually put out was an accurate and fair depiction of what happened in Gainesville from 2005 to 2010. It's revisionist history at its finest. I also believe that Urban Meyer probably had one of the final words on what did and didn't go into it. The consensus is that this was an Urban Meyer puff piece, trying to get you to feel bad for him and praise him, especially after the way he left the Jacksonville Jaguars. He certainly had his good qualities. He was clearly a great motivator and coach, but you can't ignore everything else that went on. And if Urban was the centerpiece of it all, and you explained his departure, I feel as though more of his time at Ohio State could have been discussed, especially since he was embroiled in controversy over there as well. Overall, we'd be better off seeing a whole new documentary about the team. I tried my best to cover what they didn't, but I ultimately didn't have the resources and access to players from the team that they did. They had the ability to get untold stories, which you'd expect from a series that is called Untold, and they didn't. Instead, what they did was just not tell you about any of the extremely important events. Maybe that's what they meant by untold. They just don't tell you anything. Nothing gets told. That does it for this one. If you stayed this long, I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Do me a favor and leave a like, comment if you want, and definitely subscribe if you stuck all the way through. Also turn on notifications, as that Cam Newton video I mentioned earlier is on the way. Thanks for watching. See you next time.